In this video, I'll show you how to use Orca Slicer to print your models. Slicing is a critical aspect of 3D printing success, and it's easier to learn than you might think. Welcome to the first video in a brand new series on Maker's Muse. This is 3D Printing Mastery. Let's get started. How's it going, guys? My name is Angus, and if you're new, a very warm welcome. I've been making educational 3D printing content here on YouTube for over 10 years. But 3D printers have changed a lot since those early days, so I'm updating everything. In this series, we'll be covering what you need to know to get the most out of your 3D printer, from sourcing designs, to slicing models, to printing your projects, and much more. And it's made possible thanks to my generous Patreon supporters. So if you'd like to join the community, you can check it out in the video description below. Okay, so what is a slicer anyway? Well, 3D printers are actually pretty dumb machines. You can't just find a cool model online and say, hey, print me this, and it just does it. You need to convert that 3D model into a special set of instructions for the machine to follow. And in the case of filament 3D printers, known as FDM 3D printers, those instructions are a complex set of coordinates which build up the print by extruding molten plastic out of a nozzle, line by line, layer by layer. This special set of instructions is known as G-code, and to convert your 3D model into G-code that the 3D printer can understand, we need to use a slicer. You can think of your slicer as the interface layer between the 3D model and 3D print, and these days there are tons of different slicing programs to choose from. But for this tutorial, we're going to use Orca Slicer. I chose Orca Slicer because it's powerful, in active development, completely free, and most importantly, can be used with almost any filament 3D printer on the market today. If for whatever reason you can't use Orca Slicer for your machine, don't worry. The settings I'll be discussing here in this video are fairly universal. They might just be found in different places. Alrighty, welcome to Orca Slicer. So when you download and install Orca Slicer, this is what you'll be greeted with when you open it for the first time. So this is the setup wizard. Now don't worry too much if it takes a while to load. It's just grabbing information from their server of all the latest 3D printers and presets, so you can set it up exactly how you need for your machine. So I'm just going to show you how I get it set up for one of the 3D printers I've got, which is the Snapmaker U1. So I'm going to go to Get Started, and then I can select my login region. Now this is if you want to use Orca Cloud. You don't have to use Orca Cloud, and I'm not going to show you how to use it in this video. I'll show it in a future video. But you can choose your server login region. I say Asia Pacific for me. And then this is the most important window. This is your printer selection. So there are so many printer presets available in this software. And as I said, it fetches from their server. It's being updated all the time. You can search for the vendor or 3D printer like this, or you can select from them over here on the left-hand side. So I'm going to go down all the way to SSS. So many S for Snapmaker. There you go. And these are all the different Snapmaker 3D printers or permutations of them, but I want the U1, and that's all I'm going to select. You can select as many 3D printers as you like. And then next you can select what 3D printing filament you want to use with your machine. Now it's really important to only select the ones that you want to show, because you can see there's 370 options for filament here. It's going to be way too many presets, way too cluttered. So I'm going to clear all here, and I'll select a few filters. So select the filament that you want to use on your machine. I'm going to say just PLA for this example. And then you can select what different vendors. Now, these would be slightly tweaked settings which work best with certain brands of filament. They're generally like fairly compatible, but it's a really good way to dial in filament specifically. But in this case, I'm just going to select their own brand of filament because I've got some on hand. I'm going to select Snapmaker Snap Speed. I've got that. And that'll do for now, but yeah, just take your time going through and selecting the filaments that you want as presets, and you can come back at any time to change this, but you really don't want to be too cluttered with all these different presets for filaments you're not going to use. Now this is stealth mode, and it's really important to be aware of how this works. So because Orca Slicer now has a cloud component, it will be sending information to their servers and back, and it means you can connect to your 3D printer from anywhere, but it's a potential security concern if you don't want that sort of thing. So if you like, you can enable stealth mode to disable those features. It says here, this disables all cloud features, including Orca Cloud profile syncing. Users who prefer to work entirely offline can enable this option. And in my case, I actually want to disable those features, so I will enable stealth mode. But of course, your use case may vary. Next is proprietary plugins, and this is really important if you have a Bambu Lab 3D printer. Bambu Lab 3D printers need their own plugin to work with OrcaSlicer, and even then, the latest 3D printers from Bambu Lab may not work with OrcaSlicer because they have a tight control over their machines and ecosystem, and it's tightening all the time, unfortunately. So if you do have a Bambu Lab 3D printer, you will need the Bambu Network plugin. But in this case, I'm not using a Bambu Lab 3D printer for this example, so I'm not going to install it. I'm just going to say finish. And with the wizard done, you're greeted with the home page of OrcaSlicer. So from here, you can log in to Orca Cloud if you're using that feature, or you can say new project, which is a new blank workspace to create your project for 3D printing, or you can open up an existing one as a 3MF file. So I'm just going to say new project, create new project, and that'll take us straight over to the prepare window. This is going to be where you do all of your file preparation for 3D printing. These are things like bringing your model in, manipulating it in various ways, like scaling or chopping off bits you don't need, or manipulating it in its orientation, and then most importantly, changing the settings you're going to use. So this is your layer height, so how fast the 3D print is done, or how detailed it is, and your infill, which is like how dense it is, or how hollow it is. These are all set by your settings over here on the left-hand side. And because we went through the wizard, we actually have some really handy presets. So you don't have to worry about changing those settings quite yet. In future, definitely. But if you're just starting out, I'd recommend sticking with these presets. So over on the left-hand side, we have the printer. Now, if you selected multiple printers in the wizard, you'll have various ones to select from the drop-down menu. And if you want to actually add additional printers in future, you can do so with a select/remove printers presets option here, or this little sliding option up here if you want to go straight back into the printer selection menu. Then we have filament. These are where you can change the filament presets for your print. And I only selected Snapmaker PLA as my only preset. But again, you can have as many or as few as you want show up here. And you can also save custom presets, which if you change your settings in future, you can save it to use in future projects. And then you have process, which is where all the different slicing settings are modified. Now, if you see heaps and heaps of settings like this, you probably don't want to dive into them quite yet as a beginner. So thankfully, you can actually hide them away to just show the simple settings. So this little icon here, you can go between simple, advanced, and expert settings. OrcaSlicer has well over 100 different things you can tweak, different settings you can tweak. Many of them are actually most likely to make your print look worse if you don't know what you're doing. So I'd say in the vast majority of cases, you only really want to change these settings that show up on the beginner tab, the simple settings. Make sure you have it here for now, but you don't actually need to change anything because look, there's actually all these really handy dandy different slicing presets. Different printer presets will have different presets available. There might be a lot of them or just a few of them. And in general, they're quite good. They've being developed by the community. They are refined and they're quite descriptive. So in this case, what we've got is some very, very fine layer height 3D printing settings. So 0.08 millimeter is the layer height for that setting, ridiculously fine. Then all the way up to 0.28 millimeter layer height. So they're quite descriptive. You can see all these different ones here. But I would say for your first 3D print, stick around this region, 0.16 optimal. And now we just need a model to slice. Now this could be a 3MF file, which is actually a file format for 3D printing that can preserve different print settings and information for the 3D printer, or an STL file, which is a very old but still quite used digital format for 3D printing models. Or if you like, you can even bring in step files that are used a lot in CAD modeling. Either way, to add a model to OrcaSlicer, you go up to the top here and select add, and then you can select your model, say open, and it'll bring it into the workspace. Alternatively, you can actually just grab it from a folder and drag it into the workspace like that. And that's actually generally what I do. It's a lot faster and it works totally fine. And from here, the simplest thing to do is just to slice this. Now, for most models that you download from the internet designed for 3D printing, they will come in ready to go and prepared. So I'm just going to go to slice plate here. And it's sliced with no errors. If you do see any issues or errors on the bottom right-hand side, then there may be modifications you need to do to the 3D print before you send it. But in this case, I'm just going to show you how the G-code preview works in OrcaSlicer. And this is really important to understand so you don't send files to your printer that will 100% fail. And with the model sliced in the preview window, you can see over on the right hand side, there's actually an estimate that's given to you for how long the model's going to take, roughly, and how much filament it's going to use. So it's saying that the model printing time is around 11 minutes, and it's going to use around 3.47 grams of filament. You can use this slider to scroll through the layers to see how the model is going to be printed, and by default, it'll actually show you a different color for what the different line type or different feature within the print is. So if I zoom in here, you can see that this red is the infill, that's the internal structure of the print. This orange is the outside perimeter, and then we've actually got, if I go up further, we've got these top and bottom surfaces that form like so. And this G-code preview is actually a really good representation of what the final 3D print is going to look like. You can see, if I go back to the prepare window, that those curvy edges actually get averaged out to these layers that approximate the 3D print. And it's thanks to this G-code preview that it makes understanding these settings, these presets, a lot easier. So I've sliced this at 0.2 quality. Let's say I wanted to slice it at 0.12 fine. So I'm going to change it there, slice again, and you can see that it's actually made the print a little bit higher quality. The curves are a bit nicer because there's going to be more layers. Now, the Snapmaker is a little bit fancy in that it has 4 separate filaments, 4 tool heads that you can actually choose from, which is why you're seeing 4 different filaments here on the left-hand side. But your 3D printer may very well only have 1. So in my case, I need to make sure I select the correct filament that I want to print with. And to do that, you actually just use the numbers on the keypad. So I can go 1 for filament number 1, or 4, hit 4 for filament number 4. I only need to worry about that because this printer has multiple tool heads. I need to make sure I assign the correct one to my 3D print, but your 3D printer might only have just one extruder, in which case you don't need to worry about it. So after looking at the different presets, I've settled on 0.16 optimal for the Snapmaker U1, and now I want to send this to my 3D printer, and you have a few different options. You can save this as a G-code file locally onto some external media, like a USB stick or an SD card, depending on what your 3D printer accepts, and then manually load it into the 3D printer and print like that. But the other way, which is much preferable in my opinion, is to send files to your 3D printer wirelessly over the local area network. Now, every brand of 3D printer does this differently. It's very annoying. But in the case of the Snapmaker U1, you connect the printer itself to the wireless network, and then you can find it via its IP address within OrcaSlicer. So over here on the left-hand side, I'm going to go to this little icon here that says connection. And then for the Snapmaker U1, there's the host type, it's Clipper. And then it's saying printer agent Snapmaker. And then I'm going to enter the IP address that I got off the 3D printer itself. It's currently running in LAN mode, so it's doing no cloud stuff. It's all local network. And with the IP address entered, now I can go to the device tab. And this is really cool. This actually will show you what the printer is doing as it's doing the print job. So if you're in a different room in the house, you can check on this to see what the temperatures are at, how far along the print is, and even look at the webcam if your printer has a webcam enabled, without going down and checking it directly. But don't worry too much about how overwhelming all this is. You don't need to worry about it for sending files to the printer. All you need to do is make sure that the two are connected on the local area network. So now the printer is connected to OrcaSlicer over the network. All I need to do is hit print, and then I can upload that G-code file to either print now, upload it and print, or I can just upload it to print at a later date. It's really important to stress this is just scratching the surface on what you can do in OrcaSlicer. There's so many different ways to manipulate your 3D print, change its size, change its orientation, support materials, different infill settings. It is actually a huge rabbit hole to go down. But the whole purpose of this video is to just get you started. Dip your toes in the water a little bit, going from a 3D model to a 3D print using this software. But printing with presets is only part of the story. So in the next video in the series, we'll be covering layer height and nozzle size, so you can choose the best balance of print quality and print speed for your models.